And that could lead to a much longer war.
This is ABC News Nightline. Reporting from Washington with the latest on the Gulf War, Ted Koppel.
The successful prosecution of war is often more a matter of perceptions than the application of force. History is replete with examples of armies on the verge of defeat ultimately gaining victory only because their enemies were misled. Today saw a drumbeat of restrained, even pessimistic projections from the Bush administration. Warnings that the war with Iraq may drag on for months, that the Iraqis will win some victories. Quite clearly, there is growing concern that the American public may be expecting too much, too soon. All the more reason to wonder, therefore, why the apparent goals of the U.S.-led coalition are being widened with the suggestion that Saddam must be brought to justice. Whether or not this really represents any expansion of the war is almost irrelevant if Saddam Hussein becomes convinced that Washington is determined to bring about his downfall. As part of its war strategy, it can only increase his determination to fight to the last soldier. We will examine that issue tonight, but we begin with some voices from behind enemy lines in occupied Kuwait. Here's Nightline correspondent Forrest Sawyer.
New pictures from inside Kuwait. The empty village of Salami, the Iraqi outpost closest to the Saudi border. Deserted under fire so quickly the defenders left their shoes behind. These are the only new images of a country sealed off from the world, except for satellite telephones manned by the Kuwaiti resistance. Kuwaitis inside say they were jubilant to learn the Allied assault had finally begun, and they are now resolved to endure.
You can hear everything because it's very, very quiet, but and every an hour or so, we do hear some firing and bombing. Especially the areas toward the border, they've been complaining about not even being able to sleep because of the bombing. Because, you know, Kuwait is very small, very small area, so that's why we can hear all the bombing. So, yes, if we go on the rooftop, it becomes quiet for about 30 minutes, then it comes back again, and the bombing starts again.
They stay inside their homes to avoid arrest and having their cars confiscated. Many refuse to go out even to search for food. They say bakeries and food distributors are now closed.
What you have is your food stock, and that's it. You have to rely on it until the things, you might finish.
You're saying you'll run out of food in how long?
In 2 weeks.
Does that worry you?
No. I want my country to be free. I don't care about food.
Organized resistance has halted because, one source said, for every 10 Iraqis killed, 100 Kuwaitis are executed. Almost all smuggling trips across the border from Saudi Arabia have stopped. But the propaganda drive against Iraqi soldiers is now in full swing. For months, a special psychological operations team from Fort Bragg, North Carolina, has been in Riyadh preparing a propaganda campaign. One of their critical goals, to break the fighting spirit of the Iraqi soldiers in Kuwait.
Kuwaiti pilots executed sorties on Iraq today, and those who returned from their missions said they destroyed the target completely.
Broadcasts beamed into Kuwait can be picked up on radios given to the soldiers by the resistance. Leaflets are being distributed, urging the Iraqis to give up or risk death. But some Kuwaitis say the Iraqis appear to be holding up under the pressure.
On my rooftop, I can see 4 anti-aircraft.
And they are manned all the time?
Yes, 3 all the time, 3 soldiers. Still, I can see that they are still in control because there is food that comes to them. They do change shifts and duties. So I think they're pretty much in control of Kuwait.
The resistance continues to provide information to the Allies, and sources say they have devised a code so that liberation forces will be able to identify resistance members when they arrive. And they have a message for America.
We do understand what you're going through, but you can see what kind of person we're dealing with here. He hits civilian targets, doesn't care, and if we let him be in Kuwait, Kuwait will be demolished very, very soon. So please understand that it became obvious that war was the only thing to get him out of Kuwait. Don't be misinformed about that this war is for oil. It's not. It's blood for human beings. And that's what it should be.
This is Forrest Sawyer for Nightline in eastern Saudi Arabia.
Since August, Americans have been hearing a variety of reasons why the U.S. may have to go to war. Now, 1 week into that war, have the objectives of the mission changed? Here's Nightline correspondent Jeff Greenfield.
The first piece of Kuwait was taken from Iraq by the Allies, a very small piece.
Reports indicate that 3 Iraqi personnel were killed in this encounter, and a total of 51 EPWs have been taken into custody.
It was the biggest piece of news in a day, the Gulf War's 8th, that was without the high drama of missiles shooting missiles out of the night skies. From the Allies came news of the war's first double kill. A Saudi Air Force captain shot down 2 Iraqi Mirage F-1s off the Saudi coast. From Iraq came more footage of a captured American. 28-year-old Naval Lieutenant Jeffrey Zahn was interviewed or interrogated on Iraqi television today. Also from Baghdad today came dramatic pictures produced under strict Iraqi censorship. They showed damage to what were said to be civilian neighborhoods and injuries inflicted on Iraqi civilians. That issue came up again today at a Washington briefing.
We are using the kind of ordnance necessary to destroy the target, and the answer is we do not target civilian targets, so therefore, the bomb doesn't have an effect on that aspect.
But as the news from the various battlefronts was unfolding, the outline of a different kind of battle was emerging here at home. A battle over whether the mission of the Allies was changing and what that might mean for the course of the war. During yesterday's extensive briefing in Washington, Joint Chiefs of Staff Chairman Colin Powell said again and again that the mission was the same as it has always been.
To eject the Iraqi army from Kuwait. All of our activities must ultimately support this fundamental military objective. Once again, our military objective is the Iraqi army in Kuwait.
And we are determined, in terms of the statement I made, to achieve our military objective, which is to do what the President's directed us to do, which is to get Saddam Hussein out of Kuwait.
But in a speech yesterday in Florida, the Vice President seemed to be raising the possibility of a war crimes trial for Saddam Hussein.
We demand that Saddam Hussein abide by the provisions of these conventions. Since he has not, we hold Saddam and his henchmen personally accountable.
And in a speech last night, his first since the war began, President Bush strongly suggested that Saddam Hussein personally might have to pay a price for his deeds.
No one should weep for this tyrant when he is brought to justice. No one, anywhere in the world.
Does that mean that the Allies intend to kill Saddam Hussein, to put him on trial, or at the least to remove him from power? Today, one leading congressional Democrat warned that changing the mission of the war could make the war a lot harder to end.
To the extent that you escalate the objectives to the point of surrender, then it becomes, does it not, increasingly difficult for Saddam Hussein to do anything except fight to the end.
State Department spokeswoman Margaret Tutwiler denied there was any change in policy.
Our policy is very clear. I don't believe the president last night was stating policy. He was stating his personal emotions.
With all of the intense emotions produced by this war, and with the round-the-clock, round-the-world saturation coverage, it's hard to remember that this has only been going on for 8 days. But as we were reminded only today, when White House Press Secretary Marlin Fitzwater told us to think of the war in terms of months, this conflict, and the debate about this conflict, may have only just begun. Jeff Greenfield for Nightline in New York.
In the last few hours, the air war over Iraq has continued, but there have been no Scud missile attacks on Saudi Arabia or Israel. When we continue, a conversation with Congressman Lee Hamilton and...
This is an ABC News special report, The Gulf War. Reporting from New York, Peter Jennings.
Good afternoon. President Bush is going to come to the White House briefing room in just a couple of moments. He intends to introduce his new agriculture secretary, but we're led to believe that he's also going to talk about the Gulf as well. In the minute while we wait for him, let's go quickly to eastern Saudi Arabia, where Sam Donaldson is standing by. Sam, a lot of news out there today about the Iraqis deliberately pumping oil into the Gulf.
That's right, Peter. There's concern that an oil slick described to be about 8 to 10 miles long and 2 miles wide that's coming down from occupied Kuwait may present a problem. A military briefer in Riyadh today said that the military was looking at it from the standpoint of a potential hazard. Currently, oil is being pumped at the rate of about 100,000 barrels a day, and it's creating a big mess in the Gulf. Now, whether that mess turns into a military problem, one doesn't know yet.
Okay, Sam, thanks very much. We'll come back to you after the president has something to say. It is in all likelihood the president will want to say something about the latest Iraqi attack on Israel. Military authorities in Israel are now saying that at least 3 U.S.-made Patriot missiles failed to intercept Iraqi missiles, which were launched in a great volley on Tel Aviv and on Haifa this evening, just about the time of rush hour. So that will clearly evoke the president's anger again and brings into question whether or not the Israelis will join in the present or current military action against the Iraqis. Let's go to the White House briefing room now, where Brit Hume is standing by. Brit, am I on target? Do we think the president's going to talk about that?
I would think he'll certainly be asked about it if he pauses to take questions. The principal topic that he's going to speak about when he first comes in here is the new agriculture secretary who has been named, and we believe it to be Congressman Edward Madigan of Illinois.
Okay, life goes
Congressman Edward Madigan.
At home, here's the president.
Well, I wanted to walk in here to this newsroom to say that I intend to nominate Edward Madigan, a good friend, an outstanding member of the United States Congress, to be the next Secretary of Agriculture. Ed Madigan has served for 19 years in the House of Representatives. He's been an aggressive leader on all agricultural issues, serving as the ranking minority member on the House Agricultural Committee. And I've known him for a long time. I've known him as a friend, as a leader in our party, and as a man who cares deeply about the farm policies of our government and the people from agricultural America. And he's walked in the shoes of Illinois farmers. He knows their needs, their concerns, and most importantly, their dreams for a future in agriculture. These aren't easy times for the family farmer, but they are important times. And we have been, the United States, a role model for the world in the production of food. And yet, American farm families have not always enjoyed the prosperity that they deserve. I believe that Ed Madigan is the man to go to work on these problems. He stands tall, and he'll cast a big shadow in the Oval Office there as we consider America's agricultural future. And so I want to introduce him to you, ask him to say a few words, and then I'll be glad to take a few questions and turn it over to Ed again for questions.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I want to thank you for the confidence that you have expressed in me and for this opportunity to serve you and the farmers and ranchers of America. As you know, this agriculture is the largest industry in the United States, employing nearly 20% of our total workforce. And agriculture exports amount to nearly $40 billion each year, so this will be a job that touches everyone in the country. My goal, Mr. President, is to carry out your desire that rural Americans have a strong voice in the councils of government. Many issues have a major impact on the family farmers of America, and I'm going to work hard with you to ensure that their concerns are heard in these councils of government. Ensuring that America has an abundant and affordable and a safe food supply is a big job, but I will work hard for you and for these farmers, Mr. President, to justify that your confidence in me is warranted and that we can get this job done. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ed, and I'm just delighted you're doing it.
Thank you.
Big shoes to fill, but I'm glad you're taking it on. Now, Helen.
Mr. President, what can you do about the Iraqi dumping of oil in the Gulf? Is there any way you can offset it? Or?
Well, there's a lot of activity going on right now trying to figure out what the best course of action is to clean this mess up, to stop this spill. Saddam Hussein continues to amaze the world. First, he uses these Scud missiles that have no military value whatsoever. Then he uses the lives of prisoners of war, parading them and threatening to use them as shields. Obviously, they have been brutalized. And now he resorts to enormous environmental damage in terms of turning loose a lot of oil. No military advantage to him whatsoever in this. It's not going to help him at all. Absolutely not. It has nothing to do with that. And so, I don't know. I mean, he clearly is outraging the world. But back to your question, there were some meetings that were concluded about 2 hours ago. A course of action that I will not comment, I think, is close to agreement. I'm not going to comment on what it is, but I can assure you that every effort will be made to try to stop this continuing spill into the Gulf, and also to stop what has been done from moving further south. It's a little hard to do when the man has taken over this other country, Kuwait, and is using their assets in this way. But we will try hard, and you can be rest assured that the scientists and the oil people, the military are all involved and the Saudis and the Kuwaitis and the U.S. side, all involved in the closest consultation.
Are you speaking of a retaliation?
No, I'm speaking of what we do about this spill right now. We'll get to that later.
Mr. President, you said the other night that no one should cry for Saddam Hussein when he's brought to justice. Do you envision war crime trials for Saddam? And also, can you say categorically that when this is all over, Saddam will not be allowed to remain in power?
No, I'm staying with our objectives. And the violation of the Geneva Conventions are clear, and we'll have to see how that works out. Have to see what a post-liberation Kuwait looks like there in Iraq. But our objectives remain the same, Terry. Yeah, Ann?
As you pointed out, Saddam has done a number of things, none of them really a military offensive. Are you coming to the conclusion that he's not going to fight?
No, I haven't reached that conclusion at all, because these Scud missiles attacks certainly invite instant retaliation if you can find the mobile launchers. And we're keeping on in that quest, as I indicated the other day. I think what he's trying to do is to rally support in some of the countries where he may have some. I think he's trying with the attacks on Israel to divide the coalition and to mount anti-Israel sentiment in parts of the world. What he is doing with when you dump oil reserves out, unless he's trying to show how tough he will be for Saudi Arabia or something like that, I can't figure out. What he's doing when he brutally parades American prisoners, I can't figure that out either, or British prisoners, or an Italian airman. But it is not a performance that is winning him any points anywhere, in my view. Yeah.
Mr. President, a lot of Americans would like to know, since all these problems seem to get back, at least in your statements, to Saddam Hussein,
yes,
why you don't target him. Is it because of the embarrassment you encountered in trying to bring Manuel Noriega to ground?
Hey, there's no embarrassment in that. It took 6 or 7 days, but wasn't any embarrassment. I felt no embarrassment at all. There was a man who was wanted for crimes in this country, and he's in prison, and he's going to have his day in court. So I would like to argue with the predicate a little bit, because there wasn't any embarrassment. But we've set our objectives. Our coalition partners are in accord with these objectives, and we will stay with these objectives.
But why not go after Saddam Hussein?
Because we've set our objectives. We've got our objectives in accord with the coalition, and we'll stay with them. That's why. Yeah.
Can I ask you to stop us a moment? You're going to be meeting with the Soviet foreign minister on Monday after he met with Jim Baker on Saturday. According to some of your aides, the scenario goes something like this. You now lean somewhat strongly toward postponing the February summit in Moscow, but if Putin comes here and has good news on the start, and also says, listen, if you cancel this summit, Mikhail Gorbachev is likely to be overthrown by more conservative people in Moscow within the Kremlin, that you might change your mind. Any truth to any of that?
I'm looking forward to the consultations that Secretary Baker will have with Mr. Besmertnik. Mr. Besmertnik knows the United States very well, and he knows the difficulties that we have with any use of force in the Baltics. And so I would stop it right there, John. I'm not going to go into some hypothesis that some aide may have discussed with you or anybody else. We're going to see how this plays out, and we have an arms control agenda that I want to see fulfilled. But whether it would be ready in time for the meeting is now scheduled, I don't know. We're having some difficulties there, frankly. And I expect Jim Baker will be discussing these difficulties. We have some problems, obviously, on the Baltic states. We have a lot of common ground still with the Soviet Union as a country that has been strongly supportive of our objectives in the Persian Gulf. And we have an agenda that Baker and Besmertnik will talk about, and then I look forward to seeing Mr. Besmertnik, and then I'd be in a better position to respond definitively to your question.
Just ask,
Please.
Is it less important than it used to be for you to help Gorbachev survive politically? Are you just so disappointed in his actions in the Baltics that you have to...
I'm disappointed in the Soviet actions in the Baltics because use of force is not the way to resolve that problem. And I've had an opportunity to discuss that with the president, and I know the difficulties that he faces. And I have not lost sight of the fact that Mr. Gorbachev was the catalyst, really, for much of the change that has taken place in Eastern Europe. It had a lot to do with the reunification of Germany, which is obviously in the German interest, and I think in the interest of the United States. A lot to do with common ground in the Persian Gulf. But the problems in the Baltic states, the use of force there, causes us great difficulty. And so the Besmertnik-Baker talks will touch on a wide array of issues. Some where we have very much common ground, some where we have common objectives that are not fulfilled, and some where we might have clear differences. And at that point, I will take a look again at the whole problem and see what must be done, and I'm sure the Soviets will be doing the same thing. Brett.
Mr. President, the reports from Israel now indicate that the injuries to civilians, perhaps deaths, may have been caused by Patriot missiles themselves not striking their targets, or at least if they struck them, the parts of them fell back on the civilian population, which raises anew the question of the sufficiency of the Patriot missile and the question about whether you are now contemplating additional measures to try to deal with this obviously persistent problem.
We are certainly dealing with that all the time, and we want to find ways to stop it. We want to find ways to stop these brutal, senseless, non-military value attacks on civilian populations. Yes.
Can you give us a sense of your level of confidence in the Israelis continuing to show restraint here? Obviously, it can't be any easier for them now than...
No, although this one, I felt I might be asked that question walking in here, and there's still, I'm still not certain that we know all the details exactly of what happened on this. I will again express enormous confidence in the Patriots. They are doing very, very well, but whether this was debris falling down from an intercept or not, I simply don't want to comment on it because we don't yet know it for sure. Yeah.
Sir, one more try on Saddam Hussein. Given that your military commanders have said that they're hoping that this army quits rather than fights and results in a bloody ground offensive, why wouldn't it be entirely militarily appropriate to target Saddam Hussein?
Because we're not in the business of targeting Saddam Hussein. I've set out our goals, and I think that I will say this, as I said the other day, in echoing my support for what Prime Minister Major of the United Kingdom said, no one will weep when he's gone. But having said that, we have spelled out our objectives, and I will stay with them. But who knows what would happen if he left today. I would like to think that what I have said over and over again would resonate in Iraq, and that is that we have no argument with the people of Iraq. We don't want to see a destabilized Iraq when this is all over. But we also don't want to see a continuation of this aggression. We will not tolerate a continuation of this brutality. And so we have a mix of problems. But the problems are not with the people in the streets of Baghdad. Yeah, Frank and then Jerry.
A couple of questions as to how the Gulf relates domestically. First of all, can you give the American people some sense of what this war is going to cost, especially insofar as you and your Secretary of State are turning to allies and coalition partners and others to help defray some of this cost? What are your projections? What sense can you give the American people? And secondly, on the domestic front, how do you respond to Clayton Yiders and others who are seeking to turn this issue politically against many Democrats who may have voted against the fourth resolution?
On the first part of it, I would leave that to the Pentagon. That is still being computed. There have been some that will be presented, obviously, to the United States Congress that not only has a right to know, but has the prime obligations when it comes to funding these matters. I am very pleased with the cooperation and participation from foreign countries. I think Jim Baker today had or will have a statement from regarding Kuwait participation. You saw yesterday what the Prime Minister of Japan stepped up to the plate to do, and we salute that. There will be more such information forthcoming, hopefully next week. So the burden sharing, which is very, very important, is coming along pretty well. And Congress is very interested in this. And, of course, I'm very interested in it. So we'll be presenting that along with the cost figures to the Congress. But I can't give you the specific figures. Yeah, Jerry?
May I ask you for the second part of that question?
Final question.
Oh, yeah. My position on this is that this is not a partisan effort. I thought Lee Hamilton answered that question pretty well. I can't remember exactly what he said, but he said, look, I'm prepared to defend my vote one way or another. And I think everybody views it that way. And I don't want to comment on something because I did not see exactly what Clayton Yider said. I heard that he said today that he had absolutely no intention of making the war a partisan issue because we have strong bipartisan support. And in my view, it is a nonpartisan approach. And so I've conducted myself that way. I will continue to conduct myself that way. And every once in a while, you get some shots from, I would say, that come my way, come against us on this. But I don't elect to think when I hear something of that nature that the Democratic Party is trying to make this a partisan issue, nor do I think Clayton Yider is trying to make this a partisan issue. Yes.
You say that you're going to have a look at the whole range of U.S.-Soviet issues, but the summit has officially been set already. Could you tell us, will you be in Moscow on February 11th?
I'm going to have to wait and discuss all this with Mr. Besmertnik after he has a chance to discuss it with Secretary Baker, because you may recall this was to be a summit at which we were going to sign an arms control agreement. And I'm told that we aren't there yet. So we've got to see. There's a war on in the Persian Gulf. There's a lot of reasons that this should be discussed by Jim Baker. Yeah, right back there in the middle.
Final question, please. Plan that you will be sending up in February. Do you plan to resubmit your capital gains proposal?
Stay tuned. Stay tuned. You get another. We get one more. That was Sarah. Let's see. Did you have one last time?
No, sir.
Please go ahead then.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Listen, next Tuesday night when you go and give the State of the Union message in that great hall of the House, where there's a joint session of House and Senate, all those members there, all the cabinet, the Supreme Court, the diplomats, and your wife and yourself, and that presents a great opportunity for terrorists if they can get by. Why don't you give the State of the Union message quietly from the White House?
Well, many presidents have given a State of the Union message by post office, messenger, sent it up there. And I don't know that any have been done from the White House. But if when I go to the Capitol, put it that way, I will have total confidence in the security apparatus in this country. It doesn't bother me one single bit. And I know this man has sponsored terrorism, and we continue to be safeguarding in every way we can against it. But the capital of the United States will be secure, and the people that are there will be safe. And so it just doesn't worry me, Sarah. Maybe it should. I'm not a fatalist exactly about this, because I think we are doing things to keep the capital, the people's capital secure. Yes, every once in a while you find some outbreak. None quite like that, though. That was probably the most violent, but it doesn't concern me. I'll be standing up there giving that speech with total confidence and the men and women of our security system, and they're the best. And that's why I hadn't considered changing. I am not going to be held a captive in the White House by Saddam Hussein of Iraq. And you can make a note of that one. We're going about our business, and the world goes on. Somebody asked me a while back about the Super Bowl. Do you think we ought to cancel the Super Bowl because of this situation? One, the war is a serious business, and the nation is focused on it. But two, life goes on. And I'd say one thing, the kids over there in the Gulf, somebody told me to stop saying kids. They look like kids to me, frankly, but I say it with a great affection. I say it with affection, but the boys and men and women in the Gulf, they want to see this game go on. They're going to get great instant replays over there. And so life goes on. And this is priority, getting this war concluded properly. But we are not going to screech everything to a halt in terms of our domestic agenda. We're not going to screech everything to a halt in terms of the recreational activities, and I cite the Super Bowl, and I am not going to screech my life to a halt out of some fear about Saddam Hussein. And I think that's a good, clear signal for all Americans to send halfway around the world. I admit he does irrational things. This thing today troubles me very much because there's no rationality to it. It looks desperate. It looks last gasp. It doesn't measure up to any military doctrine of any kind, but it's kind of sick. And yet we are not going to be held captive to this kind of outrageous expression, nor will we be to the bombing of population centers or the brutal parading of American prisoners. And boy, that one has hit me right square in the heart, I'll tell you. It's just outrageous what he's done. I really do have to go. Education is the subject at hand. Education for the agriculture sector.
Poor old Edward Madigan of Lincoln, Illinois, who the president has named this afternoon to be his new agriculture secretary, but clearly understanding that even though agriculture is the largest single business in the United States, $40 billion in exports, as Mr. Madigan pointed out in accepting his new job. It is the Persian Gulf, the state of the war, and the attack on a variety of targets, which the president and naturally the press and the country have on their minds today. One of the things the president said again is how ludicrous, how ridiculous, how outrageous he finds these attacks by the Iraqis on civilian population centers. There has been another one on the Saudi Arabian capital of Riyadh. There were two Scud attacks today. One got through, and ABC's Barry Dunsmore is standing by there at the moment. Barry, go ahead.
Well, Peter, just a little less than an hour ago, once again, the sirens went off in Riyadh, the capital of Saudi Arabia. Once again, we heard the sounds of Scud missiles coming over and Patriot missiles going up to try to intercept them. From the pictures that we have, it would seem that there have been some interceptions. We don't know how many Patriots, we don't know how many Scuds, but there appear to have been some interceptions. However, we also have some pictures which indicate that maybe not all of the Scuds were intercepted. Because for the first time, really, here in Riyadh, there has been fairly significant damage from one of the Scud attacks. We can't tell you precisely where this was, but it's in Greater Riyadh, in the city, and it appears to have hit an office building. There are casualties. We are not told how many casualties there are or just how serious they are. But as I said, this is the first time that any of these Scud attacks on Riyadh have caused considerable damage and have caused any personal injuries. Okay, Barry, thanks very much. ABC's Barry Dunsmore, who's in Riyadh. That Scud attack on Riyadh came only a couple hours after the U.S. military briefer, General Johnson, had said that the U.S. military continues to beat down Saddam Hussein's Scud capability, and he said quite proudly there had been no Scud attacks last night in Saudi Arabia at all. It's now 11:24, 11:25 at night there. Barry, I assume people are very much on edge, are they? Well, I must say that, generally speaking, Riyadh has been relatively calm throughout this. I've frankly forgotten how many alarms we've had now over the past 9 days. Certainly there have been several. People are not panicking at this stage, although lots of people have left town. Okay, Barry Dunsmore in Riyadh at the Allied headquarters there. Of course, there was a successful Scud attack on Israel today. The Israeli military authorities have said a little while ago
that at least 2 of the Patriot missiles failed to intercept Scuds, and so the president wasn't quite sure whether or not it was an actual Scud or missile debris from a contact between a Patriot and a Scud, but the Israelis themselves are saying that there has been 2 Scuds which the Patriots missed. ABC's Gary Shepard is in Tel Aviv. What can you tell us, Gary?
Well, Peter, the last time we spoke to the Israeli military command, they were saying no comment on whether the Patriots had misfired or fallen back to earth here. But ABC News has visual evidence that at least 3 of the Patriots did not hit Scuds. And in fact, one of them flew straight across the Tel Aviv skyline tonight and appeared to lop off the top of a building. The military command is confirming that 7 Scuds were indeed fired at Israel by the Iraqis. The casualty figures, official casualty figures released tonight, 1 dead and more than 40 people wounded. There have been a number of areas here in the greater Tel Aviv area where there have been damage reported. And now, of course, the question is whether the damage was caused by a Scud that was not hit by the Patriots or by Patriots themselves falling back to earth.
Okay.
The Israelis say that they won't know till tomorrow morning which is which when they make a visual inspection of the damaged scene.
Okay, Gary Shepard in Tel Aviv, thanks very much. Just lest we confuse you there, here is what we're getting from the Israeli military authorities. Gary is working under censorship, as is everybody else in the Middle East for that matter. But our file says that military authorities now say at least 3 Patriot missiles failed to intercept their Iraqi Scud missiles in today's attack on Israel and fell back on the general area surrounding Tel Aviv. They confirmed Gary Shepard's figures. 1 person has died and 40 were wounded in the attack, which of course raises for a number of people this question of why Saddam Hussein himself is not targeted by the coalition aligned against him. There are a great many answers to that. Sam Donaldson in eastern Saudi Arabia with some of them. Sam.
Well, Peter, I think Saddam Hussein is being targeted by the coalition. When officials like the president say he is not being targeted as an individual, I think they're splitting hairs. Everyone knows that the military is going after the command structure of the Iraqi military forces. Saddam Hussein is the commander-in-chief of that structure. So it's one thing to say we're not going to target him as an individual. That would be against U.S. policy. But I'm telling you, they're going to look for Saddam Hussein, the commander. They're going to try to fix him and fire on him.
Well, Sam, the question really is, I think, aside from the whole question of U.S. law, whether or not you're allowed under the law to deliberately attack the head of another government or another state, which you are not, but whether or not additional or extra assets, military assets, are being used to go after him, and I gather the answer to that is no.
Well, not military assets in addition to the bombing campaign. As you know, there was the Washington Post story this morning claiming that one day last week, the U.S. military thought they knew where he was, but bad weather prevented him from actually making a strike. But I think whatever human intelligence we have in Iraq, and I have no way of knowing what it is making every effort to find him, just as he's maybe making every effort to elude that intelligence.
Okay, Sam, thanks very much. Everybody now probably knows he has a lot of residences, moves around the country on a fairly regular basis, even in peacetime. And a diplomat who served in Iraq for a long time told us yesterday he even has 4 doubles, men who look like him, except up very close. The other news out of the president's news conference, he says seeing the prisoners of war on Iraqi television once again hits him squarely in the heart. The Iraqis said today they were not going to put prisoners on television again. The summit with the Soviets, wait and see whether February the 11th will be the date. Most observers up close to the White House believe there's no way Mr. Bush and Mr. Gorbachev are going to meet on the 11th of February. And as for terrorism, he says quite forcefully he will not be held a prisoner in the White House by Saddam Hussein. He will go to the Congress next week to give the State of the Union. A reminder that the director of the FBI said yesterday America should go about its business. I'm Peter Jennings at ABC News headquarters in New York. We'll keep you posted.